So let's get into this thing. First up is going to be Candice presenting on a real-world example of the importance of networking.
Sure. I actually do have a question for you, Sam, on your information, especially breaking down sort of your survey information on how people in municipalities get their jobs. Is that how they got into the municipality or how they advanced in their organization? I think that's kind of a nuance there that influences some of those numbers.
Yes, that is a great question. This is only people who got in to municipalities, not once they're already in. So as a caveat, then it is all networking once you're in the municipality.
Sure thing. All right, so let me try this out. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Here. Oops, sorry. Oh. All right. Presentation mode. Do you see the main screen? Sorry about that.
Ooh, yeah, and we have Kyle joining us.
All right. Do you see my screen? Should I just go ahead and go into it?
Please do. We're ready.
All right. Sorry about kind of that fumbling around there, but this is a good learning experience, I think. Hopefully it is for all of us, right? All right. So again, my name is Candice Au-Yeung. I am in the Seattle office of Tetra Tech, and I will talk about some of my real-world examples of the importance of networking. And it is fun to see so many familiar faces in this group, as well as ones I haven't met yet, and hopefully will sometime soon. And so it's a privilege and an honor. So happy to be here. All right. Next slide. Okay. So a little bit about me. I work mostly on municipal utilities projects, including water, wastewater, and combined sewer projects. For a big part of my career, especially the first half of it, I worked on planning level projects, which really focused on kind of the big picture of what municipalities, organizations can do to solve some of their programmatic issues, I guess you can say. And I've also worked on some design projects that really focuses more on the nuts and bolts of how to solve a very particular and discrete problem that is identified through planning. I have 11 years of experience by the time we reach May, so I've been at this for a little while. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about kind of my journey, and even though this is kind of a hackneyed phrase, I know everyone's journey is a little bit different. There's nothing extraordinary about mine, and I'm certainly not a picture perfect networking role model, but hopefully I'll go over some things that I didn't do so well in hindsight and things that did seem to work out for me. So hopefully that'll give you some encouragement to go out there if you don't have much experience with networking, or it's just a little bit intimidating, because I know I'm certainly still intimidated by it, and I definitely was to begin with. Oh, and I think this presentation will also be a good segue into Brittany's next presentation. She's going to give some tips and pro advice on how to network and plan for it. But hopefully with my examples, I will show you that you really don't need to be super prepared. The more important thing is that you just go out there and do it. And so make sure you don't get stuck in this kind of state of analysis paralysis and imposter syndrome. So that's kind of my caveat there. Alrighty. Okay. So I did go to the University of Washington. I got my bachelor's degree in civil engineering there. And while I was there, I was involved in the ASCE concrete canoe competition. As an undergrad, I ended up being a lot more involved in that than I wanted to be. At first, I just wanted to be on the team, you know, just helping out on more of the technical stuff. But right right after my senior year started, the person who we initially had being the team captain decided that he couldn't do it anymore, which kind of put us into a little bit of a scramble to figure out who can fill that spot. And so that's when it sort of fell into my lap, because I had the most experience on the team with being in concrete canoe. And so I ended up being, like I said, a lot more involved in that than I thought I wanted to be. But then between my junior and senior years of college, I did get an internship at King County here in Washington. I did apply to an open requisition for that, so that was not through networking. And I did also continue on to get my master's degree right after I finished my bachelor's degree, also at University of Washington. And so the summer in between, after my senior year and before the start of my master's program, I did an internship at SAI Engineering, which is a small private company owned by, it's a woman-owned business. And after that, I went on to finish my master's degree, and towards the end of my tenure doing my master's degree, I did help with rechartering of the student chapter there for the American Waterworks Association and WEF. So I was involved in that. And then after I finished grad school, I started my job as a project engineer at CH2M Hill, which is now Jacobs, in the Bellevue office here in Washington State, and was there for about 6.5 years. And then I came to Tetra Tech now, and I am a project engineer and project manager. So that's great, but what does that have to do with networking? There are actually quite a few kind of fine connections here, but I will just point out sort of the main ones. Right, so Carol Sanders, who was the principal of SAI Engineering, she went to the University of Washington as a student, and because she is a small local firm, she did not post her jobs onto very many platforms, and so it didn't really get advertised very widely. But because she had connections at the University of Washington, she did pass along the job announcements through the UW, and that's how I heard about it. I kind of applied for it the old-fashioned way and was selected. So I was very, very happy about that. And so the networking there is Carol's connection to the University of Washington. All right. So then after I finished school, that was in 2009, which was pretty much at the bottom or very close to the bottom of the last recession, and it was very difficult to find an engineering job. Many of my classmates that I graduated with either didn't go into engineering at all just because there weren't very many jobs available, or they really tried hard and it took them about a year to find a job in engineering. But at that time, I was lucky because CH2M Hill had this talent recruitment program that targeted certain universities, and they asked certain professors to recommend students to them who were interested. And so through my participation in the concrete canoe competition, I worked fairly closely with the faculty advisors of that team. And so one of them, Don Jansen, recommended me, and I eventually got an interview, and they flew me out to Denver, and I apparently passed that. All right. So then I started becoming involved in PNCWA when I was helping recharter the UW student chapter, but I remained involved in it through my professional career, especially with the encouragement of my colleagues. And through that, I met my office manager, who I have now, and that is how I found my subsequent position at Tetra Tech, and that's how I ended up where I am now. So networking, what is it? How do I start? it's kind of this big nebulous thing that everyone talks about like it's so important, but no one really defines what it is. And which can make it sound kind of intimidating. But what is it really? You're already doing it. And just take it as an opportunity to meet new and interesting people and to learn more about them and their perspectives and really about just your whole environment, right? Don't think of networking as a chore or a means to an end, but rather as a life philosophy. This is something that really helped me warm up to the idea of networking, because when you're just trying to prep yourself and you're thinking of networking as like a way to make career connections and to find a job, it was very intimidating, at least to me. Networking is not just about making connections, it's about building relationships, and I'll build on this a little bit later in one of my slides. And approach it with patience. All relationships take effort to maintain and time to deepen. As my previous slide showed, there are many natural connections you make without overtly trying to network. And so, for instance, I made quite a few of those when I was at the University of Washington, when I was just being a student, right? Wasn't really trying to necessarily make job connections at that time. Alrighty. So networking, what could I have done better in hindsight? The first thing that really popped in my head was to check my expectations. As I mentioned in the last slide, if I'm seeking a job or a sponsorship or whatever, don't expect immediate tangible results, like an immediate job offer or scholarship or whatever. I remember going to Seattle Section ASCE meetings when I was a college student, and you enter this room with people who are much older than you and who seem to know each other much better, and they're talking to each other about like job-related stuff. And I, as a student, was really intimidated, didn't know where to start or how to break the ice or anything. And so just getting myself to go to these types of events, it just felt as though I was really putting myself out on a limb, and it better be worth something. I better have like tangible results. But doing so, I got very impatient, and it was rather discouraging for me when I felt like I didn't really come away with anything that valuable. But again, think of networking as building relationships, and those take time to build. And this might contradict a little bit with what Brittany will say, another potential risk of trying to think of networking as something that's having these very well-defined goals of going out there and just trying to meet people based on their status and positions rather than individuals, is that you sometimes miss what values that relationship can bring to you other than their status. And you can also miss what values you can offer them in this relationship that you are trying to forge. So you should focus on quality over quantity of your connections. One of the things I did try to do at first when networking in a job context was to focus on making a certain number of connections, as it felt like that was what was measurable for ensuring that I was successful. But sometimes, spending the time to make fewer but deeper new connections can be more rewarding than making more but shallower new connections. And and a way to do this is to deepen your connections with each person is to just really spend time being a more active listener, take interest in the individual, take notes, learn maybe a little bit more about them as an individual, which makes them a little easier makes the conversation a little easier to remember and to recall some of the details about it, and also to let them learn a little bit more about yourself as well. Also, know your strongest mode of learning. This is something that I didn't learn until I was an adult. Whether it's visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, and if you incorporate your strongest modes of learning into your interactions with these other people, it can really help you recall details of the conversation. All right, so what did work for me when it came to networking? As I mentioned before, networking, when I really switched to thinking of networking as a life philosophy for building and making relationships, that's what really made it more approachable to me and not as intimidating, because it's what you're doing every day already. It's just applied to maybe these people that you would normally meet through kind of a work or career-related context. Be genuine to yourself. Humans do have built-in truth and lie detectors. So for one of my interviews for an internship, I actually asked the HR manager if she could give me some feedback on how well I interviewed. And so one of the most interesting and salient pieces of feedback she gave me, and this is from the interview panel, is that they could tell that I was kind of feigning interest and confidence when talking about subjects that I wasn't necessarily. So just be aware of that. Be genuine to yourself, and especially when you're truly excited or passionate about something, you do leave a more lasting impression on the people you talk about. And one of these is because of emotional contagion, which is believed by psychologists to be the foundation of social functioning and empathy in humans. It's that when you show that passion or that just kind of positive energy that it catches onto by your audience, and you know, they walk away feeling that way as well, maybe. So one of the more important points is to make sure you pay it forward when you're networking, and you'll be rewarded in return. So what I mean by that is increase your value to others by actively connecting those you meet to other people you know that might be good connections for them. And if you do this, they'll likely do the same for you, which kind of brings home that it is good to network with the right individuals who can meaningfully connect you to more people that bring you closer to your goal. All right. And so in conclusion, don't overthink it when it comes to networking. The more you do it, the more people you know, the easier it will become, and also the more rewarding. Networking is about really building and fostering relationships and not just making connections. Networking will lead to further networking, as Sam did talk about before, and networking will present you with opportunities you wouldn't have otherwise. One thing I've noticed is that when it comes to looking for opportunities, most people who have something available don't necessarily have it well defined enough that it's just that they leave it up for grabs by anyone. Sometimes if they know they have a qualified candidate or someone that they would like to have to work with, they would tailor that opportunity to that person, and which makes them kind of the shoe-in for it, if you will. Also, people do have their trust circles, and so if someone can recommend you to someone else, that will be taken more weight than if you were to just kind of be one in many trying to put your name in the hat for a certain opportunity as well. All right, and so that's my last slide. So hopefully those are some salient points, and I think we're ready for some questions.
Awesome. So, Candice, I'm going to kick it off with the first question.
Sure.
You mentioned that it was because of your supervisor at CH2M that you were able to get your current job at Tetra Tech. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, I misspoke. I'm sorry about that. It was at PNCWA going to one of the conferences, and actually through a friend as well, that I met my current supervisor at Tetra Tech.
And you met them at the conference?
Yes.
Very cool.
I have a question, if you can hear me okay. So how are you able through networking to, continue those networks and maintain those relationships with, these people, with these companies, in your journey in college?
How do I maintain those relationships? Was that a question that I first forged in college or through college?
Yeah, sorry, my microphone is really bad.
Oh, no worries. My volume's kind of turned a little bit low too, apparently. That is a good question. I have stayed connected through some of my professors, actually, because I still am a creeper on their listserv, so I still get their emails. And through organizations like PNCWA and AWWA, they often have some outreach programs where they want professionals to be mentors or whatnot to students, and so I volunteer for those as well, which helps me stay connected. Also through LinkedIn and Facebook, you can definitely still stay connected to people, to your former classmates too, that you met in college.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Sure.
Hey, Candice, this is Liz. I wanted to follow up on Kyle's question there. I noticed you didn't really talk about LinkedIn in your presentation, and I haven't really put energy into LinkedIn, a LinkedIn account profile. I know very few people who use it for maintaining relationships. It seems like a lot of people use it for more of the connection side, and yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I would agree that LinkedIn is not necessarily the best way to make the initial connections with people, but if someone comes across your name, they would definitely probably go to LinkedIn as one of their first resources for getting a little bit more information about you. So it is good to have it at least somewhat maintained. I know I'm not good at maintaining mine, but to have some good baseline information in there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I can kind of jump into on the LinkedIn because I'm kind of the same. I made it after college. I was like, oh, I need to have this be perfect. That's how I'm going to get my job. And then I got a job and now I'm not looking for one. So now I would just kind of let it fall behind. But recently, because of PNCWA, I've tried to kind of look at it more and just kind of see what people are posting, see what kind of job career moves that people are making. And I think if you just kind of if you see someone gets a job, if you just, congratulate them on there or something, it just kind of helps them be like, oh, this person is looking at, what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So just little things like that, I think is kind of, at least a good start. So, yeah.
Great.
Hi, Candice. I have a question as well. And this is for you and also anybody who can offer any insight. So you did mention networking. It can be really intimidating. And, when you are still in school or you're very early in your career, I was just wondering, how do you sort of, trick yourself out of that imposter syndrome to be like, I can offer something in this relationship? Because sometimes it feels like you said, it's not all about the status or what they can offer you, but what you can offer them, and it's a relationship, and in relationships it's two ways. But when you're really early on, sometimes it can be like, I don't know what I can give you back. So I don't know if you have any insight as to how you deal with that.
That's a very good question. I would say you know people through SHIP, right?
Yes.
And so you can kind of, is that how you pronounce it in the acronym
It
form?
depends what region you're in. Some people say SHIP, but I say SHIP.
Good to know. So knowing people through that, I think that's a good way to kind of pay it forward, if you will. But just getting to know people more in terms of their personal interests. You can also kind of help them solve one of their personal problems, you know.
Hey, Candice.
Hey.
This is Mary. So pre-pandemic, I went to like one conference, and you know, it's just like a room full of people, and I know that they're all older and smarter, or at least that's what I think, than me. And like just going up to those people and talking to them, I always thought like, oh, I need to have like, you know, a thing, right? Like you can't just like go up and say hi. I don't know. Do you have like that was like my biggest barrier. Once I start talking to someone, it's fine, but it's just that making that initial contact and not feeling super awkward. Any suggestions there?
No, I totally felt the same way, and it's taken me a long time to get a little bit over that. And, you know, sometimes it could be as simple as just complimenting the shirt they're wearing as an icebreaker, right? And so that's why I think it's so important to just kind of get out there and do it and just be comfortable, even though you might not feel like you're really adequately prepared and researched on who you want to meet in a room. It just kind of comes naturally, I think.
I think also if it's like a presenter or someone that you saw, like try to think of like one question to ask them and be like, hey, I really liked what you said here. Can you tell me more? I don't know. It's just something to kind of, break that ice. But I like Candice's, like their shirt, you know, I do that all the time. I'll just like, oh, I love the way you did your hair. I don't know. Sometimes I think that might be a little different, like with an older male counterpart. Because I don't know if they're always like, oh, my hair. I don't know. But I think, you know, simple kind of starting compliments or conversation starters like that are always a good, you know, start. And I think they're also aware, you know, sometimes it is a little awkward at first.
This is Erica. I'll add something to that too. For conferences, like especially if you're going on behalf of your employer, one thing that I did when I was pretty new into the industry and like didn't know very many people, I asked to be set up with like in my company asked to be set up with like a conference buddy, and you know, they introduced me to a lot of people in the room at networking events, or told me to get involved in go to a committee meeting like the YP committee meeting and things like that. So you don't have to do all of it by yourself either. I feel like having support and just asking for advice on, you know, beforehand on how to best approach it is a good idea too.
Yes, good one.
I think what will be great for you guys with Inflow is at our conference, hopefully with it being in person, is you guys will at least have each other. And you'll have, you know, me and Sam, Erica and Brittany, you know, any one of the other presenters, Candice, I'm like only seeing some people. But yeah, any one of us, you know, and even if you've seen someone like once or twice, but if you're like, hey, I saw you at the thing, you know, that's also another great conversation starter. And yeah, that buddy, it's then you and like Mary and Leslie can go around and be like, okay, I'm nervous to talk, but as long as you're with me, you know, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, one thing I always try to do when I'm in like a formal networking situation is I try to always leave my circle open so it looks more inviting to other people to naturally join in and come in and out of the circle.
It's also not weird, I feel like, at conferences to kind of like stand near a circle of like conversations, and then like you like jump in on the conversation. Yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any more questions for Candice? We'll take one or two more if anyone's got them.
I was just going to add a piece. I'm curious if this feels true to you, but when I taught, I used to talk to students about active listening and describing ways to listen and ask questions. And then ultimately, so that piece of that skill set, bringing that to a conversation. And then the other piece is remembering that the people that we're talking to they're humans, and it's exciting and interesting to get to know each other. And that's really the point of networking, is like, you're finding people that you can talk to about the stuff that you love.
Great point.
Very good point. All right. Well,